Hello again. In our last video, we discussed grammatical tenses and what questions we need to consider when deciding which tense to use. As I mentioned at the end of the video, we're going to start by learning about the simple tenses. That means that today we're going to learn the simple present tense. Do you remember the two questions that I gave you in the last video to use to determine which tense to use? If not, as a quick recap, they are basically, when does it happen, and is it a regular state or a temporary one? The first thing to note when talking about the simple present tense is that we use it when we are speaking about a current situation. That's why we call it the present. This is the answer to the first question. The second thing to consider is that simple present is used to describe a situation or truth that doesn't change, or a habit. Essentially, it is something that is true over a period of time, and that period of time is right now. Some examples of this would be something like brushing your teeth. If you do it every morning, it is a habit. I brush my teeth every morning. Another example would be your age. It's something that doesn't change regularly, so you would simply say, I am however many years old. The reason that this is called a simple tense is because it is simple to form. Don't forget that when we talk about tenses, we are talking about the verb of the sentence. In simple present tense, we are simply using the base form of the verb. Do you know what pronouns are? They are words that can replace a noun, and in a base form, we typically think of them as I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. When we are forming a positive sentence using the simple present tense, we have to conjugate or change the version of the verb that comes after the third person singular, meaning he, she, and it. We do this by adding an s or an es at the end of the verb. The rest of the pronouns don't require any changes to the base form of the verb at all. Please note that when I say this, I am talking about a regular verb. There are plenty of irregular verbs that change this basic rule slightly. However, typically, even if it doesn't follow that rule precisely, it is still the third person singular that changes in a different way. Let's try an example. Remember that the simplest form of a sentence in English only requires a subject and a verb. In these simple sentences, the pronoun will act as the subject, so you can easily see the verb conjugation. Let's use the verb walk. I walk, you walk, he walks, she walks, it walks, we walk, they walk. Let's look at one more example using the regular verb eat and a slightly longer sentence. Let's pretend that we are talking about eating cereal every day for breakfast. This means that it is a regular occurrence that is happening in the present, so we can use the simple present. The conjugation will happen to the verb eat as we shift it according to the pronoun we are using. I eat cereal for breakfast. You eat cereal for breakfast. He eats cereal for breakfast. She eats cereal for breakfast. It eats cereal for breakfast. We eat cereal for breakfast. They eat cereal for breakfast. Please note that the pronoun you can refer to one person or multiple people. In both cases, we simply use the base form of the verb. Do you notice how the word eat does not change except for when we are using the third person singular, also known as he, she, and it? There are lots of resources on the internet that can give you practice with conjugating verbs. If you are learning simple present tense and need some practice, I highly recommend Googling simple present tense worksheets or simple present tense conjugation for all kinds of practice. As a start, however, you can also simply write the pronouns that I mentioned on a piece of paper and then write each verb according to the pronoun mentioned. Try it with words like take, call, get, and read to start. You can pause the video and try it now if you would like. Great work! I'd like to mention some spelling rules for conjugating simple present tense. If you remember at the beginning, I mentioned that you add an S or an ES to the base verb when using third person singular. You should add the ES when the verb ends with an O, CH, or SH. If the verb ends with a consonant and then a Y, we change the Y to an I and then add ES. For example, fly changes to flies. However, if the word has a vowel before the Y, then we just leave the Y and add S. For example, day changes to days. If you are working with a modal verb, such as can or must, they never change form and simply stay the same. Obviously, irregular verbs can conjugate slightly differently. Since we will use them quite frequently as we learn other tenses, I want to show you the conjugation of two irregular verbs, be and have. The verb to have removes the V and E at the end before adding the S for third person singular. I have, you have, he has, she has, it has, we have, they have. The verb to be changes into something completely different, but it's important to remember that these words are simply a form of the verb be. I am, you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, they are. If you remember, at the beginning I mentioned that this is the method for forming positive sentences in the simple present tense. However, if we are forming a negative sentence or a question, we actually use the auxiliary verb or helper verb do. When we use the helper verb do before the second verb, we actually only conjugate do, not the other verb. Let's look at the conjugation for the verb do. I do, you do, he does, she does, it does, we do, they do. Excellent. Now, if we are forming a negative sentence, we also need to include the word not in between the helper verb and the main verb, like a sandwich. Since the main verb does not get conjugated, we simply use it in the infinitive form. Let's look at the main verb eat again and conjugate it in the negative form. I do not eat. You do not eat. He does not eat. She does not eat. It does not eat. We do not eat. They do not eat. I recommend that you pause the video and try some of the verbs that we have already spoken about, like walk, call, or take in the negative form. Nice job! Now let's look at a question form. In question form, we also use the helper verb before the main verb. However, we swap the pronoun with the helper verb at the beginning to indicate that it is a question and not a sentence. Let's try this with the main verb dance. Do I dance? Do you dance? Does he dance? Does she dance? Does it dance? Do we dance? Do they dance? Awesome! Please also note that if you are making the question negative, we do not move the word not. We still only swap the pronoun with the helper verb do. For example, does he not dance? You can pause the video and practice this with the rest of the pronouns if you would like. Something else to note is that the verb be is always irregular. So even in negative sentences and questions, we actually don't use a helper verb and we just add the word not after the conjugated form of the verb in negative form. Or we swap the pronoun with the main verb in the course of a question. For example, instead of I am, we say I am not for a negative sentence, or am I for a question. This is a lot of information, and obviously we have not discussed all of the possible irregular verbs that exist in English. However, this gives a good overview of the simple present tense, and I hope that you use this crash course to practice simple present tense in positive, negative, and question forms. Don't forget to subscribe for free to my YouTube channel and tune in for each of the other tenses coming up. Have a great day!